Welcome back to Straight Talk Africa. Well, President Macky Sall of Senegal was one of the leaders invited to the White House last Thursday by President Obama to discuss African democracy and prosperity. Mr. Obama praised his leadership for moving the country forward after last year's elections. My colleague Timothy Donangmai and myself had an opportunity to speak with President Sall in a wide-ranging interview about his visit and issues in his country. Monsieur le Président du Sénégal, Monsieur Macky Sall, merci.
President Macky Sall, thank you again for speaking to the Voice of America. You just came out of a meeting with American President Barack Obama. What were some of the topics of discussion with the U.S. President?
Avec le président américain.
Je voudrais vous remercier d'abord, puisque la Voix de l'Amérique, j'ai l'occasion de vous parler.
First, I would like to thank you and the Voice of America. You all do a wonderful job delivering information on the continent. President Obama initiated this invitation. We spoke about many subjects that focused on state institutions, the government, the rule of law, and also development and unemployment. We also often talked about security, stability, and the fight against terrorism. But above all, President Obama wanted to hear from Africa's leaders, our vision regarding a partnership between Africa and the United States. Of course, I thanked him for the opportunity to speak with him and for the invitation to the White House, for it was a sign of encouragement in regards to our internal efforts. You know, Africa is a continent forever in motion, despite the fact that many don't believe it. Africa is a continent that is very dynamic, a very young continent, where business can flourish and where the rate of return from investments can be very high. I also told President Obama that we wish he could look at Africa with a different lens. It's a positive Africa that wants a partner, not one that's here to beg for help. Basically, we need investments from the West, and from our side, we can promote good governance and the rule of law. So we want a win-win situation. I think that he took good notes. I said to the President that America has initiated many great programs. AGOA, for example. That is an important initiative that allows African countries to gain access to American markets without paying taxes. But I told President Obama we're not able to export to the United States because in order to export, you must produce. In order to produce, you have to have electricity, which we don't have enough of. That's one of the drawbacks.
Speaking of the energy crisis and the frequent power outages in Senegal, several years ago I interviewed former President Abdoulaye Wade, and to me it seemed like he had a plan in place to truly regulate the energy industry. Several years later, it seems that things have not improved. So from your point of view, what are you planning to do to solve the problem?
La crise énergétique, il fallait d'abord la comprendre pour pouvoir lui apporter des solutions.
One must understand the energy crisis before they're able to suggest solutions. The solutions in times of economic crisis have always shown their limits. Most of the times, the companies that were in charge of the distribution had serious deficits. So usually, the state is already subsidizing all year long. We've been at this for over a decade, and the problem hasn't stopped. Personally, I would take a different approach, one that's structural. I want to take a little more time to show results, but in the end, it will be good results. We would like to invest in natural gas. We don't produce enough, but we do want to invest in liquefied gas. We need charcoal. It'll cost about 65 francs. We just made a deal with a Korean company, which was here before dealing with us at a higher price of 85 francs. But we negotiated down to 65, a great savings as a result. We are also working with a company based in neighboring Mauritania. We are also working to invest in solar energy as well.
Mr. President, it's been 1 year since you were elected with 65% of the vote as you gave enticing promises. Where are you today when it comes to realizing the promises you made, like creating jobs and lowering prices for goods?
D'abord, je vous dis tout de suite, c'est pas sur la base de promesses alléchantes que j'ai été élu.
First of all, I have to rectify that I have not been elected because I made all these enticing promises. That wouldn't be respectable to the Senegalese people. To think that the choice they made in me was only because I tried to entice them with promises. I took 3 years and went all over the country, village after village, to see what the needs were and create a good relationship with my people. Propose a program resulting from the people's priorities that I called the path of development, Yonu Yokuti, has been to establish universal health care, which is being implemented this year. I'm also working to help the very poor with a new welfare system I put in place, lowering taxes, which helped increase Social Security for retirees. About unemployment, my country cannot increase jobs if it doesn't create the right environment. For example, the agriculture industry can create jobs, but if it's not productive, then it doesn't matter. We have to modernize it in order for our farmers to get more benefits out of it. Therefore, last year I injected 64 billion CFA in the agriculture sector, plus about 30 billion to help farmers face emergencies. That's resulted in a good season that has given extra revenues to the farmers. So people shouldn't obsess with the state and think that we have to create all the jobs. I said that I'd create 500,000 jobs in 7 years. But since then, we've reduced the terms to 5 years in office. My goal is now to have about 350,000 new jobs.
I'd like to come back to assessing your first year in office. It might be premature to ask you the question, of course, but a few days ago, former Senegalese Prime Minister Idrissa Seck came out and criticized your work, or the lack of it, to put it mildly. How do you react to such statements?
Aucune réaction, aucune réponse.
Well, I actually have no reactions and no answers. I'm surprised, first of all, that one of my allies, who has deputies and ministers and other representatives in my government, would utter those words. But he's free to say what he wants. What's important for me is what I'm doing for the Senegalese people. The former president, Abdoulaye Wade, told me that if I became president, I wouldn't be able to pay federal employees' salaries after 2 months, because he knew the situation he left us in. But thanks to my government's credibility, we were able to find the necessary resources. We reduced some expenses in the government to help our farmers, to increase education, and to get back our diplomatic credibility, showing that Senegal is on the way to growth. We're also working to protect public funds. I will pursue anyone who uses public funds to enrich themselves, and I'll do everything in my power to recover what's been stolen, so the resources can be used to develop the priorities I spoke about earlier.
Mais parlant de ça, c'est notre dernière question qui ont à voir avec les audits. Les Sénégalais pensent que vous passez...
Speaking of resources and audits, many Senegalese say that you've spent a lot of time auditing officials from the previous government, including the son of President Wade. What would you like to respond?
De répondre.
Chacun a son avis.
Everyone is entitled to their opinions. Everything depends on which side you're on. If you give your microphone to people who are being investigated at the moment, of course, they'll tell you the government is not doing much. No one can tell you their salaries haven't been paid. We found a huge national debt when we came in that we paid. But if people want to get rich with illicit money, it's not going to be under my watch. If we want to create healthy conditions to revitalize the economy with transparency, then I'm game. You will not see one person from the rural areas say that. I just came from Matam. It has nothing to do with what's happening in Dakar all day. I am going to Kolda next week. I saw the inefficiencies in my government. I told my Prime Minister that we have to change our methods because our administration is not capable of making development happen if we continue to operate that way. Because there are too many bureaucracies, the budgets are not implemented the right way, the population is here year after year, and they are given many promises, but the impact is not reaching the base. Those are the issues we should tackle.